You're now listening to the Fantasy Filler Podcast, where we put you in the driver's seat every week, all year long. In the NASCAR racing world, from top news stories, latest results, and best fantasy lineups, we'll have you up to speed and out in front before the drop of the green flag. So let's dive in with our host, Vanilla Wafers.
After 26 races here in the 2023 season, we have now found our 16 drivers who are going to be racing for the championship, as the regular season finale at Daytona International Speedway has come to a close. The race was really exciting, and there was a lot of takeaways from that race. We'll talk about that, as well as the Xfinity Series and Truck Series race and more on today's episode of the Fantasy Filler Podcast. What a crazy weekend it was, especially in the Cup Series, for it being the wild card race is what I like to call it, the final race before we start getting into the playoffs, because the race didn't disappoint. There was a lot of craziness that happened there. We had a big one. We had a very terrifying accident, which we will dive into a little bit. And then we had a really exciting finish. It didn't have to end under controversy, which is pretty rare when it comes to a super speedway event. And the best thing out of everything is I feel so much better. I know you guys heard me last episode. I sounded terrible. I was talking really quiet. Obviously, my voice is cleared up. Apparently, what was ever in the area has been flushed away or blown away, whatever you want to call it. It is gone, so I feel so much better, and I can talk to you guys how much I loved/hated this weekend. It's mostly going to be love. There's some things I did not like, obviously. I think that's going to be the same for every single race. I mean, they're never perfect. But yes, we had all three series race here this weekend. Two of them at Daytona International Speedway, and then the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series made the return to the Milwaukee Mile, and they raced on Sunday. They were actually the last race of the weekend. I think it would be best to talk about the Xfinity Series race, then the truck race, and then we'll end it on the Cup Series race, because yes, even though the truck series race ended more recently, I don't think people are sitting here in anticipation like, oh my God, forget the Cup Series. I want to know what happened in the Truck Series race. Like, I bet you there's a lot of people out there who really don't think like that. So we will kind of stay in order, except we're just going to mix up the Truck Series and the Cup Series as far as talking about the biggest takeaways. With that being said, let's talk about the first race that happened here this weekend. There is definitely a lot to talk about here in this race, a lot of excitement. So without further ado, here's the 24th race of the Xfinity Series 2023 season, the Wawa 250 powered by Coca-Cola. Alright, so in this race here in the Xfinity Series, we only had 38 cars on the entry list, meaning everybody that was on the entry list was able to race in the main event. Some noticeable drivers who are running in this said event: we have the number 53 car was going to be driven by Natalie Decker. We have J.J. Yaley, kind of a Cup Series regular. He was running the 07 machine. And then Trevor Bayne in the number 19 machine for Joe Gibbs Racing. And then we also had the number 27 that was driven by Jordan Anderson, making his return back to racing after a scary incident that happened at Talladega last year in the Truck Series. So those were the noticeable names that ran in this event. We had a total of 6 cautions for 32 laps and 20 lead changes amongst 9 different drivers. In the end, though, it wasn't the driver who led the most laps. It wasn't even the most dominant driver. He didn't even win any stage points throughout the entire race, but he led the most important laps, and that was the one near the end. For Junior Motorsports, we have the number 7 of Justin Allgaier getting a big win here at Daytona, the first of his career at Daytona International Speedway, finally able to get the monkey off his back and get a huge win for that number 7 machine. Justin Allgaier, if there's anyone who I always am happy to see in victory lane, is Justin Allgaier. He's a very cool driver. He's very friendly out on the racetrack. It doesn't seem like he causes too much controversy. And here in this race, that's exactly what he did. He didn't really wreck anybody. He didn't really cause any huge problems. He minded his P's and Q's, and he was able to escape this race basically unscathed. Like, he had hardly any problems here in this race. Yeah, sure, he wasn't able to score any stage points, but you sometimes have to be really safe in these events. And in a race that basically 30 cars were involved in at least one incident in this race, That just shows you how chaotic this event can be. So you want to be, in a way, very protective, and you also want to be very cautious on what moves you want to make. And I think Justin Allgaier did that until the very end, but that was the time when he needed to be aggressive. Avoid the last incident, which was the big one that took out a lot of people, and he was able to hold off a hard-charging Sheldon Creed and Daniel Hemrick, drivers who were looking to get their first win of the season. Sheldon Creed trying to get his first win here in the Xfinity Series. And Sheldon Creed, man, what has he got to do to get his first win? He missed his victory by 5/1000ths of a second. That's the craziest thing about this race was the finish was just 5/1000ths of a second. Justin Allgaier in his interview looked at the screen for a second. And he didn't even think he won the race. He looked at it. He's like, wait a minute, I think Sheldon Creed got me. And the commentator who was beside him said, oh no, you clearly won that race. But that's how close it was. And Sheldon Creed had himself a dominant car here in this race. Won stage 2, was right up there with his teammate Austin Hill. He too avoided the big accident that took out many people, including the number 21 of Austin Hill. He was still able to continue, but he was no longer a factor in the event. Led 21 laps. I guess the only thing he can really look at this race kind of positive is the fact that he was able to gain points ahead of the cut line. But even then, that's still got to be really bothersome. He's done everything he can to get a victory. And he's a talented driver. It's just things don't work out for him. And this is the perfect example. What is this? Another second place finish? How many second place finishes has he had at this point? It's been unbelievable. And once again, this time now being 5/1000ths of a second from coming from his first victory. Sheldon Creed is still making improvements. That is one thing to be positive about here. And his finishes are getting stronger and stronger. So it's definitely one of those situations on, well, maybe his best chances have passed him. No, it's just a matter of when. Drivers like Chase Elliott and William Byron, it took them forever to get their first victory in the Cup Series. And once they did, they were able to get a few victories very, very close to each other. Hell, Chase Elliott, once he got that first victory, he got 2 more within the next 2 months. Carson Hocevar is another great example. Remember how long it took him to get his first victory? And everything happened to him? And then he finally got that win at Texas, I do believe it was. And then bam, now he's a contender for winning almost every single event. It's been unbelievable. So Sheldon Creed, he's just got to get that monkey off his back. You know it's bothering him. But still, you got to find some positives in these situations. And he was the one who scored the most points in this race, meaning that he was able to put a bigger gap between him and the cut line. Here's the rest of the top 5. We have the number 11 of Daniel Hemrick, the number 48 of Parker Kligerman. Also drivers who needed some big nights, and they were able to do it here, as Daniel Hemrick was able to score 44 points, and Parker Kligerman was able to score 36 points. He went from being outside of the cutoff line to now in. So that is absolutely huge for this team. There's still more races to go. This is not the cutoff for the playoffs like it is in the Cup Series. They still have 2 more races. So either way, Parker Kligerman, he still has to be really focused here these next couple of weeks. At the same time, you can also say that he's been able to put a good enough cushion where the confidence is there and now the momentum's on his side, that it's going to be a really good chance that he is going to be able to make it in. Of course, that is speaking very, very early. There's some big races coming up here, including Darlington. Even though Darlington is not much of a wild card compared to Daytona, there are still some interesting drivers who can become contenders in that race. And you never know with a fuel mileage race, even though we don't have it nearly as much as we have in the past, that can always shake things up. But for right now, Parker Kligerman is above the cut line, and that is exactly what he needs to do. Keep this consistency going, and he will be able to race for a championship. In the 5th spot, we have the 00 of Cole Custer. Pretty decent run for him overall. Just stayed around inside the top 10. So a pretty positive day. And then from 6th on through 10th, we have some big names here for some teams that are usually don't finish near the front. So these were some big moments for these drivers. You have the number 39 of Ryan Sieg. He started in the last position. He was able to finish 6th in this race. Also made a sponsorship announcement earlier this week. So that 6th place finish is definitely huge for that number 39 car. You got Parker Retzloff in the number 31 machine. He was the highest finishing rookie, finishing 7th. The number 78 of Anthony Alfredo. This is that team's first top 10 finish this year. And Anthony Alfredo, it was a really good run for him. I think the only kind of blemish in this race was the fact they caused one of the big big ones. He got loose going through the tri-oval, and he ran up the track, took out quite a few cars, and I'm pretty sure he's going to apologize to all those drivers. I know he didn't do it intentionally, but that is probably the only bad thing I've seen from the 78 team this weekend. This was definitely a good weekend that they absolutely needed. They've always had the potential to finish inside the top 10 in multiple races. Now they were finally able to do it here with this 8th place finish. And right behind him, Greg Galding in the 08. Remember, SS Greenlight Racing had both their cars miss the event, I think last week. And that was unbelievable. That was a terrible blow to this team. Now you get Greg Galding able to finish inside the top 10. That's really going to help out that team, especially as far as owner points go, because on their side, they were able to gain 28 points. So, big moment for them. Hopefully, it helps them out for qualifying for the next few races. But either way, a great performance by Greg Galding. Once again, a good driver here at these super speedways. Then rounding out the top 10, we have Justin Haley in the number 10 machine. An adequate run. He wasn't able to score any stage points. He really wasn't a strong contender here in this race. Definitely not the strong super speedway racer that we are used to seeing, but it was still an okay run. I mean, that 10 car getting a top 10 with multiple drivers driving in it, I wouldn't say that's a terrible night for them. So, good run for all these drivers to be able to finish inside the top 10. Here's some drivers to finish outside the top 10 that we should mention. These guys were able to score stage points. You have the number 25 of Brett Moffitt. He got some damage in one of the incidents, so he finished 18th in this race. Still in a must-win situation, of course. Sam Mayer, he also had himself a really good car, and he all of a sudden, he also got into that incident, and he was credited with the 19th position. And then basically all these drivers were involved in the big incidents near the end. So I'm going to stop repeating myself and tell you some of those drivers who got caught up in those wrecks. Sammy Smith, Chandler Smith, Austin Hill, John Hunter Nemechek, Trevor Bain, Josh Williams was another one who got caught up in a wreck. And then moving down the roster here, Brandon Jones at the number 9. So big names here who had themselves really decent runs. All these drivers were able to score stage points. And unfortunately, it did not equal to their finish. They all had really strong cars, especially Austin Hill. But if you're not able to avoid the big one, unfortunately, you're going to finish near the back. And for these drivers, they finished 18th or worse when they should have finished near the top 10. Riley Herbst, he had some problems here in this race, and it unfortunately put him a couple of laps down. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. It was either the gearbox, steering box. I'm really drawing a blank, and I don't know why. It's kind of unprofessional of me, but Riley Herbst suffered some problems early in the race, and he was a couple laps down. I think he was 3 laps down at one point, and it was almost impossible for him to gain those laps back because he had another driver right in front of him that was 2 laps down, and whenever cautions happened, that other person was able to get the lucky dog. So kind of a bad run for this team that they needed to have a really good run, and it felt like this fell on the team's hands because apparently those parts were not up to par, and they weren't paying attention. They just threw it on the car, and they were like, yep, we're good to go. And unfortunately, it cost Riley Herbst, as of right now, a spot in the playoffs. And that is not good. That is not good at all. Hopefully, Riley Herbst can bounce back for that team's sake, but man, to make a mistake like that, especially in a very important race like this when you know Parker Kligerman's going to run well, Not a good performance by that Stewart-Haas Racing number 98 team. They are credited with the 24th position, and right now they're on the outside looking in. The biggest L in this race, if I had to give anyone an L in this race, it would be the number 53 of Natalie Decker. Now, I know Natalie Decker gets a lot of grief. She really does. But this race was another perfect example on why she's not ready for the Xfinity Series. And I don't even know if she's ready for the Truck Series, even though she ran there for quite a while. Because the first big one that happened on lap number 43. And it took out quite a few drivers. Actually, the number 7 of Justin Allgaier, he did technically get involved in that incident, but he didn't really receive that much damage. I think what happened was he got bumped into and slid down the racetrack. So that technically counts, but obviously when it was all said and done, he was able to finish in the first position, so it didn't really affect him that bad. But during this wreck, took out quite a few drivers, a lot of drivers. And there was one car that I did not see at all throughout that incident, and that was the number 53 car. And then all of a sudden, I see Natalie Decker with a lot of front-end damage. And I'm like, where in the world did that come from? You were nowhere near this wreck. How did you get damage? Apparently, it was an exact duplication of what we saw down in the Truck Series when she ran the Bristol race, where the spotter was like go high, go high, go high, go high. We're wrecked. And he just starts cussing her out on the radio. It was an unbelievable thing. And apparently she didn't listen to her spotter once again, gets caught up in a wreck. For NASCAR 101, listen to your spotters. Don't be like Natalie Decker, because she did it once again, and she's credited with the 35th position out on lap number 42. I just don't get it. I really don't get it, how she can keep making those mistakes and just ignore her spotter. You got to have a lot of balls to ignore your spotters, or zero brains, and she has no balls, so obviously she has no brains. That was a real messed up joke, but I don't know what else to say. I mean, she keeps making these huge mistakes, and I don't know how she keeps doing it. 53 team, they needed someone to give them a good finish, and they relied on Natalie Decker. Here was the result. I don't know. Watch the replays and tell me if you can find that number 53 car, because for the life of me, I could not. Overall, this was a really fun race. The finish was exciting. The big ones were absolutely crazy. You did not know who was going to get caught up, who was going to be able to survive. And there were some key moments where drivers were able to make some big saves that kept them in this race. Like Sheldon Creed in the second big one, he was able to avoid that. Justin Allgaier, he was able to avoid most incidents that kept him away from receiving major damage. And you had a lot of talk as far as the playoff bubble went. It was a great race overall to keep that talk going. And as we go into the next race, which is at Darlington, there's a 20-point gap between Parker Kligerman and Riley Herbst. And with Daniel Hemrick able to score 36 points above Parker Kligerman, meaning he's 56 points above the cut line, it's basically between these two drivers, the number 48 and 98, if we don't receive a new winner outside of the cutoff line. So things are really stacking up here in the Xfinity Series to see who can make it into the playoffs. Now let's move on to the Sunday race that just happened here in the Truck Series. This is going to be the 18th race and the second race of the playoffs. They started their playoffs a lot earlier than the Cup Series and Xfinity Series, so without further ado, here's the final results for the Clean Harbors 175. All right, so in this race, we had a total of 37 trucks on the entry list. A lot of people were talking about an entry in this race that we haven't seen in many, many years, and that was Blackjack Racing with the number 21 of Dexter Bean. Believe me, I heard about this because I had an old YouTube video where I talked about Blackjack Racing, saying they'll never return. They will never see him again. And everyone absolutely blasted me like, look, they made it on the entry list. Looks like someone was wrong. Well, they didn't qualify for the event, so technically I am still right because that was the only truck that was not able to qualify for the event. So, haha, I'm still on top. Anyways, we had a total of 7 cautions for 44 laps and 5 lead changes amongst 4 different drivers. The driver who was able to win the race was the driver who won both Stage 1, Stage 2, led the most laps, clearly the most dominant driver. He was one of the most successful drivers when it came to Worldwide Technology Raceway. He's able to do the same thing here at Milwaukee. How about the number 23 of Grant Enfinger for GMS Racing, able to get the victory and lock himself into the round of 8. Great run for these guys, and especially after the news that they're going to be shutting their doors at the end of this season. They definitely want to do everything they can to get one of their trucks into the championship 4, and the only one that can do that is Grant Enfinger, and he had himself a spectacular run here. I mean, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that he was the strongest truck, able to put 7 points towards the playoffs, so that's going to help him out even more. Just all around great things for this team. Hopefully Grant Enfinger can find a ride next year. He's more than deserving of it. I mean, what he's been able to do in this 23 truck has been pretty impressive. I'm not saying that they're a weak team by any means, but he's able to still get victories. So if a team wants to trust a more experienced driver, I think this is the driver to go. And I'm still surprised to this day that a team like Thor Motorsports got rid of him. It really surprises me. But you know what? I don't know what was going on behind closed doors. I don't know what kind of sponsorship problems they were having. Maybe he was supposed to stay with Chevrolet. That could be a pretty good reason on why he didn't stay with them. Either way, it was a huge pickup for GMS Racing, and here's a clear example of it. Just, he did everything this weekend. Got the pole, won both stages, led the most laps, won the race. Perfect weekend for that number 23 truck. Finishing right behind him is the number 42 of Carson Hosefar, followed by the number 19 of Christian Eckes, and the number 11 of Corey Heim. The reason why I put these 3 drivers together is because these 3 drivers just had themselves all around really dominant performances. They were the ones that were really battling out for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th 4th position. And they're basically the most competitive drivers. I mean, Christian Eckes and Corey Heim, I think, have already locked themselves into the next round just by points alone. I think Carson Hocevar technically still hasn't locked himself in, but he's really, really close. Yeah, he's 2 points behind Grant Enfinger, 5 points behind Christian Eckes. So basically, he just has to make sure he doesn't wreck, and someone like Matt DiBenedetto and Ben Rhodes finish first and second in both the stages. That's basically the situation. So Carson Hocevar is really good at this point. But all these guys, very consistent runs, doing exactly what they need to do. Carson Hocevar showing that maturity as time goes by, showing a lot of good consistency. Christian Eckes been one of the more dominant drivers. Corey Heim's been the dominant driver. So yeah, good runs for all these guys, and for them to finish 2nd through 4th, that is just a perfect example on how they've been running here this year. A great run for the number 88 of Matt Crafton. We haven't really talked about Matt Crafton too much, even though he made it into the playoffs. I almost feel like he has a hard time making it into the top 10 as it is. And he was able to finish 5th here in this race. So great finish for him. That definitely gave him a good cushion between the cutoff line that he absolutely needed. In the 6th spot, we have the number 4 of Chase Purdy. He was the highest finishing non-playoff driver. Pretty decent finish for him. I'm pretty sure he wanted to finish a little bit higher, but he unfortunately just did not have one of the stronger cars at the beginning of the race. He was able to make those adjustments there near the end. So good job for that number 4 team. The number 98 of Ty Majeski had a little bit of controversy because I think they failed pre-race inspection, and they also had one of their tires seized. So, a little worrisome for those guys. Hopefully it doesn't cost them any playoff points, whatever they find in the NASCAR research and development. But yes, parts were taken away, and more than likely they're going to be done with some more research. So that should be some news here in the following days, so keep an eye on that for that number 98 team. And here's the rest of the top 10. We have the number 7 of Derek Cross, just making a one-off appearance, it looks like, here for the number 7 for Spire Motorsports. Then we have Jake Garcia, the highest finishing rookie in the number 35 machine, finishing 9th. And then Bailey Curry in the number 41, finishing 10th. In the 12th spot was a playoff driver, the number 38 of Zane Smith, just not really a strong run. There's really nothing else really to say. It just was a weak run for him, and that's a bit of a bummer. I mean, I felt like Zane Smith is one of the top 4 drivers in this mix. He did not show it in this race. He did not show it at all. So he's still good, I believe, as far as points go. He still has himself a pretty good cushion. Yeah, he's in the 6th position. He's at 2,085 points, and the cutoff line is around at 2,059 points. So I still say he's still very comfortable. Unless he gets involved in an accident, I don't see him missing the next round. And then going down into the 16th position, we have the number 99 of Ben Rhodes. Felt like everything fell apart for that number 99 truck when he made contact with the number 1 of William Sawalich? How do you say that last name, guys? Sawalich? I'm going to start calling him Sandwich. How about that? William Sandwich in the number 1 machine. That's going to piss off somebody. Anyways, these guys made contact. They were running around inside the top 10, and William was having himself a really good run running around inside the top 10, and he finished 7th and 5th in the stages, and then with that contact, backed into the wall, ending his day. He was still able to finish on the lead lap, but he was not competitive at all. Then Ben Rhodes went down pit road, and he had to start near the back, and he never was able to really climb himself back up as he finished in the 16th position. That puts him now below the cut line, and that is definitely where you don't want to be. And somehow, some way, he was able to score less points than the number 2 of Nick Sanchez, who made heavy contact with the number 11 of Corey Heim. Corey Heim just straight spun him out, but maybe Corey Heim was just trying to get around him. At that point, the contact was made. The truck was already going sideways, so he might as well fully go. I don't know what really happened there, but Nick Sanchez unfortunately collected some damage, and he finished near the back of the race, finished 24th. He was still able to get a lot of stage points, so he was able to score 27 points, still more than Ben Rhodes, and that's very, very important because that was able to put him in a gap above the cut line, and he still has that little bit of breathing room going into Kansas, but an absolute bummer. Still, no questions asked, because if he was able to finish inside the top 10, that would put him many, many points above where he wouldn't even have to worry about that. So a bummer for the rookie. I'm still believe that he can still make it up. He's been really fast at the 1.5 mile tracks. It was just an unfortunate situation between him and Corey Heim. And what a bummer too. You have someone who spins you out. That person finishes 4th, and then you finish 24th. But the biggest loser in this race was definitely the number 25 of Matt DiBenedetto. Had nothing for this event. Nothing. It was abysmal. 2 laps down, finishing 27th. He was not a playoff driver at all here in this event. I don't know what happened to them, but it just fell apart. It really did. Oh my gosh. They now sit 10th in points. They're behind by 20 points. I don't see how they're going to be able to make this up unless they're able to get a win or at least win one or two of the stages. That's literally the situation they're in. It was just a real bad showing for that 25 truck. And it was great to see them make it in, but they might be leaving very quickly here in the first round, as they are the ones that are the deepest here. They are right now 20 points, like I said, behind Nick Sanchez. So big bummer for him, and I'm just hoping for that team to just have at least a positive run at Kansas, because if we see anything similar to what we saw here at the Milwaukee Mile, it's just going to be sad, and I hope we don't see that. So with that being said, why don't we look at the playoff line and see which drivers have advanced and which drivers are still yet to make it into the round of 8. We have Corey Heim, Christian Eckes, Grant Enfinger, Ty Majeski. They are all locked in via points or a victory. Then you have the number 42 of Carson Hocevar and the number 38 of Zane Smith. They have a pretty comfortable gap above the cut line, so they're more than likely going to make it into the next round. Matt Crafton with a good finish that was able to throw him 9 points above the cut line. Nick Sanchez, thank goodness for those stage points, because he sits above the cut line by only 3 points. And then he had the number 99 of Ben Rhodes. He's behind by 3. And Matt DiBenedetto behind in 20. Next race will be at Kansas, so we'll have to see what happens here when they go into the final race for the round of 10 for the Truck Series. Now let's move on to the big race. It's the one that everyone is talking about. Let's now dive into the Coke Zero 400, the 26th race, and the final race here in the regular season for the NASCAR Cup Series. All right, so in this race, we had a total of 39 cars on the entry list. 3 open charter cars. I thought maybe 1 or 2, but not 3. That was pretty cool to see, as those 3 drivers were the number 62 of Austin Hill for Bird Motorsports, Chandler Smith and number 13 for Colic Racing, and the number 6 of Riley Herbst for Front Row Motorsports. We had a total of 3 cautions for 18 laps. Yes, believe it or not, that was it. We only had 3 cautions, and it felt like we had about 6 of them because of the incidents that happened. They were absolutely huge, and 22 lead changes among 17 different drivers. There was a lot of dominant drivers here in this race. The guy who won the race, he only led 2 laps, but let me tell you something. They have always shown their speed at super speedways. Now it was finally the planets were able to align for them as the winner of this race for RFK Racing for the 3rd time this year. The number 17 of Chris Buescher winds up in victory lane with huge help from his teammate, the number 6 of Brad Keselowski, as they were already locked in on points. That was just icing on the cake for them, as they were both able to get playoff points. Chris Buescher 5, Brad Keselowski 1, and they only led a combined total of 8 laps. This was a great performance by them. They played their cards right, and we knew that these guys were super strong here at these events. But they just proved it right there. When they work together, man, it's really hard to stop them. And they have all the momentum in the world. You know, RFK Racing, I don't think they were able to get either of their cars last year into the playoffs. Now they got them in with so much momentum, it's not even funny. I mean, Chris Buescher, 3 wins. 3! Did you ever think Chris Buescher was going to get 3 wins in the NASCAR Cup Series? He's been here for so long, and I know with someone like myself, I never thought that was going to happen. I thought Roush Racing was dead in the water, and if he went over there, I'd be like, okay, maybe some top 20 finishes, but that's about it. Now that Brad Keselowski has came over, this whole team has just been revitalized, and Brad Keselowski has been a huge help for it. And what a unselfish person that he was here in this race, because he could have had every single moment to get right beside Chris Buescher and not devastate both their chances of winning the race. I'm pretty sure if he was to go side by side with him, they still would have had a good shot. Maybe you would have had another driver like Eric Almirola in that mix, but I still think one of them would have won the race. Nope, he stayed right behind Chris Buescher to earn that victory. Just great job by them. That's awesome for Brad Keselowski. I hope he gets a win in that 6 car here soon. He deserves it, because he was able to give Chris Buescher that win. I'm pretty sure he's going to pay back the favor at Talladega. I just want to say that I was right that his first win will be at Talladega. I just want that to be true. Please make that a reality. But good job for RFK Racing. They got all the momentum in the world going into the playoffs, and just a great performance here in this race. The following two drivers were drivers who were trying to get the victory but just came up short. One being the number 10 of Eric Almirola's strong car in this race. Always just had one person that was slightly stronger than him. And then the biggest heartbreaking one, the number 9 of Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott needed the win. We all knew it. We knew it was going to be a tough feat. And he just couldn't beat the Fords. There was just no way to beat the Fords here this weekend. Yes, we had a few of them get taken out, but man, once you had one Ford gone, there was another one here. And look at the dominant Fords here in this race. You had people like Chase Briscoe. He led 67 laps here in this race. Absolutely impressive. Kevin Harvick, he led 14 laps. Eric Almirola, he was in that mix. He was in the talk. Joey Logano, he led 9 laps. Then you had the RFK drivers. I mean, Ford was just dominant. Hell, Harrison Burton for the longest time was considered a potential driver who could win this race. It was just no chance that the Chevrolets had against them here in this event. And the biggest loser in that is obviously Chase Elliott and his teammate Alex Bowman. They finished 4th and 6th here in this race. They were able to get stage points, but they were in a must-win situation. And unfortunately for a lot of Chase Elliott fans, he will not be running for his second championship here for the playoffs. He missed too many races, honestly, in my opinion. If it was like 3 races, then maybe it would have been a bigger heartbreak. But, I mean, when you miss 7 races, it just... If he was able to make it into the playoffs and he was able to make it into the Final Four, I know a lot of people are not going to like this, but it's going to be like an asterisk championship that we saw with Kyle Busch. Just missing that many races and still being able to run for a championship. It just doesn't feel right. It feels off. And yes, Chase Elliott had some opportunities to win races. He was very close. He still was very competitive in a few races. At the same time, there were many races where the team overall made mistakes, and he made mistakes as a driver. So it's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate for the Chase Elliott fans, but I do believe next year he'll come back stronger, and they're just going to be in the rebuild stage right now. Who knows? Maybe he's going to be able to get a victory or two. People have been able to do that in the past when they're not running for the championship, get multiple victories. Tony Stewart's one that pops up to mind. He missed the championship in 2006, and he was still able to get a couple victories in the final 10 races. So hopefully that's what this team is going to try to do. They're just going to try to get wins at the moment. It's just unfortunately not going to be for the championship. Alex Bowman, just at least he was able to get some top 10s here near the end, but it was just a horrible summer stretch. They didn't have anything going for them, and you can't rebuild a season in the final 3 races of the regular season because you've already lost so many points as it is, and this is exactly what happened to them. And great for them to get in the top 10, great to be in that mix, and great that they had that Fortnite paint scheme. I know a lot of fans love that, but they put themselves in a corner. I mean, I think everyone was thinking that Chase Elliott was already the stronger super speedway driver out of the two, so I'm pretty sure the Hendrick drivers were going to go to Chase Elliott, which is a huge bummer for Alex Bowman, but that was just the way it was going to be. And yes, a 6th place finish, I guess that's one thing to be positive about. But after a season at the beginning of the year where they had so much potential and they don't even make it into the playoffs, that's an absolute heartbreak. Again, another driver who missed out due to injuries. It's just really hard for the Hendrick camp to lose 2 of their drivers or here this early into the playoff season. I mean, they weren't able to make it in. And I bet you a lot of people put guaranteed money that Chase Elliott was going to make it into the playoffs. So, and probably even Alex Bowman as well. So, bummer for these 2 guys. I know they're going to come back strong next year, but they're going to have to wait until 2024 to be championship contenders. Finishing outside the top 5, we have the number 8 of Kyle Busch finishing 7th, the number 24 of William Byron finishing 8th, Kevin Harvick 9th, and then Corey LaJoie in the number 7 able to wrap up the top 10. It was actually a great run for Spire Motorsports as they were able to get both their cars inside the top 11 because Ty Dillon was able to finish in the 11th position. That team overall, minus RFK Racing, had the best average finish, so good job for them. I would say Hendrick Motorsports, but Kyle Larson, as you guys are all aware, got into another accident. I knew he was going to get into another accident. I didn't care how much speed he had. He's just not good at super speedways. I just knew that was going to happen, and I hate it. I want to see him run well, but it just doesn't happen. He finishes 27th overall. Let's look at a few drivers who finished outside the top 10 that we need to mention. Finishing 12th, we have the number 23 of Bubba Wallace. He stayed out of trouble this entire race. He had himself a pretty fast car. He was able to finish 6th in one of the stages, and for him to finish in the 12th position, that just locked himself into the points if we had a repeat winner, and that's exactly what happened. So So good job for Bubba Wallace. He will be running for a championship. Let's see what he's able to do here in the first round, as these first few races do not really seem to favor Bubba Wallace quite that much. Maybe Kansas a little bit, but that's about it. So it will be interesting to see what he can do, but he's running for a championship. He couldn't say that last year, so best of luck to him, and 23-11 for them to get both their cars into the playoffs. I know this was a very stressful race for them, but basically what we saw from who was very competitive here in this race, unless Stewart-Haas Racing, one of those drivers, are going to get a win minus Kevin Harvick, then Bubba Wallace was going to look good in this race regardless. Going down the roster a little bit, we had Christopher Bell. He was able to finish second in one of the stages. He finished 16th overall. So I guess okay points for people who put him in their fantasy roster. I just expected him to finish more near the top 10. I believe he got caught up in an incident as well. He was caught up in that big one that happened in lap number 96. Still able to continue, but still a rough showing for him. Daniel Suarez in the number 99 machine. He actually had himself a really good car here in this race, starting to show that he's a good super speedway racer, but he needed the win. I know technically there was a world where he could make it in by points, but we knew that wasn't going to happen. And things just did not work out for him in the end. He was near the front the entire time, and there near the end he finishes 20th. Exact 100% what he did not need to do here in this race, but it is what it is. Trackhouse Racing definitely did have themselves a fall from grace compared to last year. Hopefully Ross Chastain is able to rebuild some of that momentum here going into the playoffs, but right now it's a huge bummer for Daniel Suarez in that number 99 machine. There was a few races where he had himself some really good cars, and sometimes it was just bad luck out of his control, and sometimes it was bad luck that was in his control, most noticeably the road course races. So Daniel Suarez will not be running for a championship here in 2023. One of the stage winners was Martin Truex Jr. He, unfortunately, I believe he was another one who got caught up in an incident. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. There's so many of these drivers who maybe they did, maybe they did not. They finished near the back. They weren't really contender here. But the biggest thing about Martin Truex Jr. was with that stage win and also Denny Hamlin getting caught up in some problems, he was able to win the regular season championship, which is huge as far as points go. So Martin Truex Jr. has a lot of momentum, and he is the most favored to win the championship. It's been a great showing for him and that Toyota camp, so great job for Martin Truex Jr. And he's been one of those drivers who's been reliable at almost every type of racetrack. So keep him in mind in a lot of these races here coming up, most noticeably Darlington and maybe even the Bristol night race, so we shall see. And then right behind him, you have some of the Toyota runners, the number 45 of Tyler Reddick, the number 11 of Denny Hamlin, drivers who got caught up in some messes and they were not able to continue forward with as much momentum as they had earlier in the race. These drivers were able to lead laps, Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. Tyler Reddick technically did not, but he was still running near the front. And then moving down the roster, we had AJ Allmendinger, who got damage in one of those wrecks, took him out of contention. He was in a must-win situation. Chase Briscoe led the most laps, 67 laps. He too got caught up in a wreck, was not able to continue. He was out by lap number 156. And then Ryan Preece finishes in 31st position in what has to be one of the scariest accidents that we have seen in a very, very long time. He made contact with his teammate, and he went sideways going down the grass area, got some wind underneath him, and it lifted that 3,500 car up, and he barrel rolled 10 times. And he got so much air in one of those hits. It was unbelievable. It was a scary incident. As of right now, he has left the Halifax Medical Center early this morning. Doesn't look like there's any problems with him. I think they just wanted to check to make sure he was okay, which he is. Just scary incident. You got to watch this wreck. I haven't seen a wreck like this since 2003 or 2004 with people like Ryan Newman in the Daytona race or Elliott Sadler in the Talladega race. It's been a very, very long time since I've seen an accident that scary. And Ryan Preece was one of them. But the car maintained its form, especially around the cockpit area. So there was no fear of him really getting injured compared to the old generation cars. I mean, someone did a side-by-side comparison with Darrell Waltrip like 30 years ago, and then to Ryan Preece, you can definitely see the major improvements they have made throughout the years. So thank goodness for that, as safety has been a concern here with the next gen car. They have made steps in the right direction as far as keeping the roll cage and the body of the car intact where the driver is. So thank goodness for that. But man, what a crazy wreck we saw with that number 41 machine of Ryan Preece. And then down here at the bottom, we have Ty Gibbs. He got caught up in an incident. Ryan Blaney is the one who made contact with. Ryan Blaney went head on into the wall at the end of turn 4. It was a very violent impact, but thank goodness for safer barriers, and also thank goodness for the crush panels that have been added onto the next gen car. He was okay. Ty Gibbs is not going to be able to run for a championship, so no rookies will be in the mix for the playoffs. And then Austin Cindric, Riley Herbst, they both had actually really good cars here in this race, but they also got caught up in that incident. They were not able to continue on forward. This race was absolutely fun. Make sure to watch the highlights. It was really entertaining. There's a lot of stories that were being talked about. I think the biggest stories here is the regular season champion is Martin Truex Jr. I think he has a lot of momentum right now out of all drivers. And then you have Chase Elliott missing the playoffs here. Very unfortunate for him, but he missed so many races that there's not much he could do. Bubba Wallace was able to make that final spot here in this race due to points, so good job for him. And here is the layout going into Kansas here for the 2023 NASCAR playoffs. In the first spots, we have the number 24 of William Byron and the number 19 of Martin Truex Jr., both sitting at 2,036 points thanks to victories and stage wins, as well as the regular season championship for Martin Truex Jr. In the third spot, we have the number 11 of Denny Hamlin. He sits at 2025. Fourth is the number 17 of Chris Buescher at 2021. In the fifth spot is the number 8 of Kyle Busch at 2019. Kyle Larson sits in the sixth spot at 2017. In the seventh spot is the number 20 of Christopher Bell at 2014. The number 1 of Ross Chastain is sitting at 2011. The number 6 of Brad Keselowski sits with 2010. Then in the 10th spot, we have the number 45 of Tyler Reddick sitting with 2009 points. The number 22 of Joey Logano is with 2008 points with his teammate, the number 12 of Ryan Blaney. Those are the last drivers technically inside the cutoff line for the round of 12. And here's the last 4 drivers who will start on the outside. We have Michael McDowell sitting at 2007 points, so he's behind Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano by 1. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in the number 47, he is behind by 3. Then you have Kevin Harvick only scoring 4 points towards the playoffs as he sits in the 15th position. And then the last spot is the number 23 of Bubba Wallace. No extra points. He sits at 2,000, so he'll start it off 8 points behind the cut line. It's going to be very interesting to see here in the round of 1. But if we see anything close to what we have seen as far as the intenseness that happened here in this Daytona race or the excitement that we saw at Kansas earlier this year, it's going to be an exciting playoffs to watch from beginning to end. And that will conclude our final results for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Here was the top 3 from this weekend here in our fantasy roster. And finishing in the third spot, we have Powder Spring Maulers. He was able to score 193 points. That guy, Adrian, was able to finish second with 195 points. And the only person to score 200 plus points, he won by a landslide with 214 points to be exact. How about Ricky Bobby $? You are the winner here this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. I finished in the 5th position, but I was able to finish 1 point above Mechanical Manny, 33, and I think that's a big win. That's a big win for me, so I am happy about that. But now we move into the playoffs now, and right now it looks like the strongest drivers, or strongest teams, is Redhead 69, Stewart Haas Racing, and Chief Joe Koob, as they are in the top 3. Now we go into the final stretch, the final 10 races of the season. If you want to join that fantasy league, you can do so at fantasygames.nascar.com, as I do believe they have a separate group where we can watch you guys compete for those final 10 races for anyone who's doing playoff battles. So that will be very fun to watch. So you can still join the league. We're at 91 people, which I still think is absolutely spectacular. Next week will be Darlington for the Labor Day weekend race, the Southern 500. It's a crown jewel event, so obviously it's going to be an exciting one. A lot of people are going to be watching it. We might do a little something where we kind of predict which drivers will be the first ones eliminated in the playoffs. That is going to be up for potential for the next episode. We'll see if I can get any guest on. Everyone's super busy right now because everyone has their own podcast. They're obviously going to probably be doing the same thing. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do so. Just look up Vanilla Wafers, as I am on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. YouTube, I just released a video just talking about Alan Gustafson. I might do more videos like that. It seemed like it got a little bit of traction and people really did enjoy that kind of format, so I might do that in the future. So if you want to check that out, that is Vanilla Wafers. Just look that up on YouTube. You'll find me pretty quickly, just around the other cookie sponsor videos. And then on Instagram, it's Vanilla Wafers 33, and TikTok, it's Vanilla Wafers 44. Shorter videos, all NASCAR related, but a lot more fun, a lot more diverse. I mean, YouTube is still fun. They're just longer narrative videos. On TikTok and Instagram, it's more silly. So if you guys like that kind of content, make sure to tune in on there. And then if you want to reach me during race day, Twitter's usually the best spot. Just look me up, Vanilla Wafers 44 on there, as I usually will just post random shenanigans from time to time. It won't be consistent, but by God, it might be funny. So let's wrap up the video there, guys. I have been your host, Vanilla Wafers, and I have been able to take you to the front of the field. So why don't we grab that checkered flag, do some burnouts, and head on out. So you all take care. This has been the Fantasy Filler Podcast.